Welcome to episode 28 of Blue.Green.Fusion, Blue Collar Jobs, Green Economy. I'm the host, Lee McQueen, and the title of today's episode is Empty or Full. Last week I discussed the human factor as a wild card in decision making. The human factor can create an unforeseen dilemma or an unexpected gift, depending on the situation. Sometimes those wild cards work to our benefit. Sometimes wild cards force us to seek alternative solutions. I've got community news, I've got headlines, and a few other tidbits of information to share. The community news includes Des Moines Neighbors, a meeting on June 23rd, Des Moines Historical Center, a visit on June 26th, and then Des Moines City Council, a visit on June 27th, and then 8035, a visit on July 3rd.
I appreciate everybody, the attendance tonight. I assume you all showed up to see the mayor tonight.
At the Des Moines neighborhood meeting, well, it's actually called Des Moines Neighbors. This is our newsletter.
So go the neighborhood, so goes our city. What your thoughts are in terms of neighborhood needs, citizen needs, public safety items, cultural items, education items, transportation.
It was a very interesting meeting, a pretty good turnout. It was attended by Mayor Cownie, Councilman Coleman, and then Councilman Moore. Approximately 60 members of the community, and those are including Meredith, Merle, Beaverdale, and possibly Sherman Hill, since that's the location of the meeting at 1620 Pleasant. Mayor Cownie said he was pleased with the turnout.
Thank you all so much for the years of service that you've given to your neighborhood. You need to be involved. You need to let your elected officials know that we have to have a voice, and we have to tell our elected officials what our priorities are. But again, I would encourage all of you to reach out to elected officials at every single level.
Mayor Cownie took note of the information that he received from the community. Starting off, there was a complaint or a concern that boards and commissions of the city are not representative of the neighborhoods. There was a complaint or a concern that neighborhood leaders are not truly representative of concerned issues of residents, citizens, and neighborhoods. There was a complaint or a concern that neighborhood leaders require residents to pay in order to vote. There is a recommendation by a community member that citizen organizations should be inclusive and transparent. Mayor Cownie said that he believes that people do owe it to themselves to do what they can to advocate their concerns, even if the vote doesn't go their way.
Yes. Call them, email them, write them, do whatever you can. Every neighborhood's needs sometimes are different, but some neighborhoods, it's a neighborhood cleanup. I will tell you that our council and individually, all of us, and for me specifically, I've tried to talk to every individual that is connected in any way to flood response and stuff. But they have to coordinate all those, the whole Mississippi Valley or basin, which includes Des Moines and the Raccoon River and everything else.
There was another question by a citizen. Will the city assist with membership drives, such things as printing up membership information? The answer, the city does its own printing at Polk County, so there may be other low-cost alternatives that neighborhood organizations can use. My interpretation then was that printing by neighborhood organizations and other administrative costs that come up from having an organization that meets regularly may explain the membership fee. Mayor Cownie also talked about flooding and a neighborhood notification system. Councilman Moore spoke about changing power levels in Des Moines neighborhoods. Councilman Coleman gave a historical perspective on interactions between neighborhood organizations. Mayor Cownie recommended that Des Moines Neighbors get its board representation together and refocus and realign. Mayor Cownie also encouraged citizens to fill out an application for city boards and commissions to build a large pool for council members to use to draw upon when filling those posts. One citizen suggested that the city board and commission sign-up event, which Frank County did agree was a good idea. There was also mention of neighborhood revitalization and opportunities to incorporate diversity in neighborhoods and how to apply to become part of the neighborhood revitalization program. There were also different ideas for fundraising discussed. In terms of Des Moines Neighbors, anyone can hold an individual membership for $15. And Des Moines Neighbors is a 504 organization.
Here's my history on the two organizations, because I think you asked about that specifically. After they were divided, I took a seat on the NRO board, Neighborhood Resource Office. It didn't work the way it was supposed to. It didn't generate its own funding like we thought it would. The finances of the organization shrunk, so we looked for a way to merge the organization, and it became a merged organization with something called Rebuilding Together. I don't know how committed they are to continuing the services that they did. We need someplace that one of their key missions is to support the neighborhood. People want vibrant neighborhoods. And they want successful organizations. So
elections for Des Moines Neighbors board positions will be held at the next meeting, which is July 28th. Please contact Don Vines, an at-large member on the board of directors. You can also reach him by phone, which is 515-244-7593, and that number is publicly listed on the Des Moines Neighbors newsletter. And so that's available through them, and that's how you contact him if you're interested in running or participating in the Des Moines Neighbors. I also visited on the corner of East 6th and Locust in downtown Des Moines. You'll see State of Iowa Historical Building, the Des Moines Historical Center, and that was on June 26th, and it was for this program, Swing and Sway, Iowa's Electric Railways. So, on the back of it, it has a lot of information, but I'll just give you the details here. The State Historical Museum has that exhibit. It's at 600 East Locust, that's Des Moines. Their hours are Tuesday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. and then Sunday 12 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. There's always free admission, and then there's the website. It's www.iowahistory.org. You can call for more information. That's 515-281-5111. Swing and Sway, Iowa's Electric Railway. It was a very good exhibit. I learned quite a lot when I was there. The film, they had a little video that you can push a button and then the video would come on and show more information. When I was there, it wasn't functioning. There was something wrong with the sound. But I found quite a lot of information available on the walls, and so I'll be sharing that with you as well. But I do recommend that you take a first opportunity to see that exhibit. It's very interesting and very timely in light of the passenger rail discussion that's been coming up here in Des Moines area and then the state of Iowa too. In Iowa, as elsewhere, the predecessor to automobile transportation was the railroad. Steam railroads were complemented by electric street railways, and interurban lines provided local transportation. And I found a bit more information. This is the Chicago, Iowa City Passenger Rail Service Project Summary. This was put together as a PDF, and it's available from the Iowa Department of Transportation and then Iowa Connections, and the slogan is to get on board. The economic analysis included in the document demonstrates the cost effectiveness of the Iowa investments in the Chicago to Iowa City service and details the benefits that Iowa can expect from Iowa's expenditures. And so there's several breakdowns. There's a lot of statistical information. And I'm not going to get too far into that, but they're going over economic outcomes for the state of Iowa, job creation, business activity created by the project, travel cost savings, and then freight railroad outcomes, other benefits such as transportation, connectivity and access, business, education, quality of life, energy and environment. There's also information in the same document about public safety outcomes and then public costs of transportation. And so they're comparing throughout this document numbers from highways, aviation, public transit, and then passenger rail. And so then there's also ridership and revenue projections, and then similar Midwestern route comparisons. And so that's second to the last page, where they have a chart breaking down the different types of service offerings, total ridership, ridership growth, round trips per day, the universities and colleges served, major station stops. So it's a very thorough discussion on the Iowa City to Chicago and reverse passenger rail service, and it's worth a gander. There was also some additional information that I found as a PDF. This time it's the Iowa City to Chicago passenger rail fact check. This is done by the Iowa City Area Chamber of Commerce, and they're doing a lot of point counterpoint, answering uncertainties or questions or doubts raised by persons who do not support passenger rail service from Chicago to Iowa City. And so they go through economic development information, they take on subsidies, how it affects taxpayer money, funding use, reliability and ridership, and then environmental benefits, tourism, costs and convenience, and then development around the depots, and then financial solvencies. And so again, that's the Iowa City Chamber of Commerce. It's PDF available from them, and includes a lot of fact-based information that might be useful for those considering the possibilities on either side. Horse cars to trolleys, the electric trolley era, the interurban era, economics. There's also a recent article by the Des Moines Register, and this is from June 28th. It says that Amtrak officials provide support for Iowa service. Amtrak Board Chairman Tom Carper made an 11th hour visit to the legislature on Tuesday as lawmakers debated the merits of state financing for a proposed Iowa City to Chicago passenger train. Carper, the former mayor of Macomb, Illinois, insisted he was only visiting the State House to answer questions from lawmakers about the proposed Amtrak train. But he left no doubt that he believes expanding Iowa passenger rail service is a good idea. As the legislature pushed toward a Thursday night deadline to approve a state budget, lawmakers still haven't resolved whether state money will be available for the proposed service. And I'll be doing a legislative update at the end of the show, and that will be addressed too. It goes on, the U.S. Department of Transportation last year awarded $230 million grant to Iowa and Illinois to help establish the new passenger route. But the project needs a $20 million match of state money from Iowa to extend the line from the Quad Cities to Iowa City. House Republicans contend the proposal should be paid for with private money, not state dollars. Senate Democrats support state aid. I'm thinking public-private partnerships have been a repeated statement from the Branstad administration, from Governor Branstad's administration. And this might be one opportunity to put together not only public, not only private funds, but a public-private partnership to match those federal dollars. But anyway, that was leading up to last week's decisions by the legislature. And then we have something from the Quad City Times. This is June 30th, and the result of what happened. Passenger rail link funding stays alive in Iowa budget. Okay, so state lawmakers retained a small appropriation for a passenger rail link from Iowa City through the Quad Cities to Chicago in the fiscal 2012 budget, setting up a battle next year over a committee $20 million to draw down as much as $280 million in federal funds for the project. And if you notice, there is a discrepancy. In the previous article, it was $230 million. This article is $280 million. And the reason for that is stated later in the article. Originally, $230 million was identified for the Iowa City to Chicago line. That could grow to $280 million when passenger rail funds rejected by other states are redistributed. And this is according to State Senator Matt McCoy. So it's very interesting, the possibility of that, the fact that the fund could actually grow, and if it grows enough to the point where we can extend that rail line not only to Iowa City, but all the way to Des Moines, wouldn't that be fantastic? So in some respects, it might seem short-sighted that it hasn't been completely decided yet, or it's genius. I'm not sure. It's one or the other. But anyway, Jeff Danielson, a state senator from Cedar Falls, also commented. He says it's hanging by a thread, and this is referring to the passenger rail proposal. So the House Senate Conference Committee succeeded in preserving about $5 million currently in the budget. Republicans' conferees blocked, for now, additional funds for fiscal year 2012, which began last Friday and beyond. The funds make up the state match to draw down federal money to develop the passenger service to Chicago. And so basically what the federal government is saying, that they want to see skin of the game. They want to allocate the money for actually a nationalized railroad. So they want to allocate that money because it actually has interstate importance, not just to Iowa, but to the surrounding states, particularly from the manufacturing and industrial arena, and then here in the Midwest, agricultural too, to move goods and services back and forth. But the federal government is looking for us, the states, to put skin in the game, to give our commitment to as well to the project. My understanding is also that the state is also looking for additional skin in the game, perhaps from private enterprises that might participate in the project. So, details to be hammered out. The important thing is that the door has not been closed. It has not resulted in a no. It's mostly resulted in not right now, but possibly in the future. Okay, so we're still on rail, and there's an article that I saw in the New York Times. This is the Saturday, July 2nd New York Times. Tiny little article in the corner, and it's about Florida. Florida rail project will move forward. Governor Rick Scott on Friday lifted his freeze on the start of construction for a commuter rail system in Central Florida. The 61-mile, $1.2 billion project has been strongly backed by the business community, and Representative John L. Micah, a Republican who is chairman of the House Transportation Committee, but opposed by Tea Party activists and other critics. Mr. Scott had expressed concern because local governments would be asked to cover any revenue shortfalls after 7 years of operation. but he said that he felt he had no choice but to approve the deal, as supporters had threatened to sue the state because the legislature had authorized the spending. So that's how that's playing out in Florida. There's also another update from Denver, which I'll get to later. I will go on to say, referring back to what I saw at the Historical Center, that in the past, the Iowa Railroad ensured economic stability for itself by offsetting the passenger payload with freight, which was actually more profitable at that time, and it may still be the case today. With the full force of manufacturing and agriculture that takes place in Iowa, it might work to the benefit of rail advocates to study the feasibility, and then if it seems like it's a working formula, to emphasize that type of business model closely, since it did work in the past, to include a large portion of freight in the business model. Rail means jobs, and when I say jobs, I'm referring to what I referred to last week. This article by the City View, referring to the 200,000 jobs that Governor Terry Branstad campaigned on business sectors targeted for growth: advanced manufacturing, renewable energy, biosciences, information technology, financial services, and food manufacturing. And I'm thinking that rail could only enhance all of those areas from a business and manufacturing standpoint. We'll see how that eventually plays out. Rail does mean an increased ability to transport raw materials, manufacture goods, and people, which is good from a business and infrastructure and manufacturing and agriculture point of view. Okay, so I made a stop at the Des Moines City Council. This is their agenda on the 27th. There were several themes: recommendations for appointments to city boards and commissions, continued advocacy by Mayor Cownie for the Iowa State Legislature on guarding CDBG funds, community development block grant funds, TIFF funds, and then appropriate commercial property tax levels needed to run the city of Des Moines. I'm at 8035 at downtown Des Moines. There's music playing, there's people about, lots of stuff happening. I'm on the corner of Grand and 13th Street. Lots of people here. General support for redevelopment of property at 3801 Merle Road. It's a $5 million project at Merle and Douglas. This was sponsored by Councilmember Grease, and then Councilman Coleman also spoke in support. There was also a note on Council Request number 44. This came from Councilmember Christine Hensley to speak regarding post office locations downtown. This was also covered by the Des Moines Register in this article. Des Moines City Council voices need to keep postal sites, and that's from June 28th. United States Postal Service officials are mulling whether to keep the doors open at Highland Park Branch and at 100 East Euclid, and then the downtown office in Capitol Square, and that's 400 Locust Street. City Council members voted unanimously on Monday to send a letter of concern about the state situation to the postmaster, state lawmakers, and U.S. Representative Leonard Boswell, whose 3rd Congressional District includes Des Moines. And so Christine Hensley says, we have closed other post office operations down on 14th and Grand. So really the only major postal facility you have downtown is in Capitol Square, which is a high-use operation. You do have one on 2nd Avenue, but it is difficult to get to. If the Capitol Square branch closes, it would be the U.S. Postal Service's 2nd downtown Des Moines location to shut its doors in less than a year. The East Village branch closed in last January. So Councilman Robert Mahaffey also weighed in. He says that they've already taken one off East 14th, and now they're trying to take the one out of Highland Park, which has great public transportation into the area for those who don't have their own vehicles. He says that, I quote, I certainly like to maintain that there if all possible. There is a post office branch at the intersection of 2nd and University, but Hensley pointed out that there's no bus service to that location, and she says that makes it even more important to have some type of location on public transit in the downtown area, which is great that the council members are paying attention to that issue, probably raised at the community meetings, but the fact that they voice those concerns in terms of public transportation aspect is very interesting. And so that does bring us to DART, Des Moines Area Rapid Transit, which we've spoken of here on Blue.Green.Fusion. Let's see that article title there. DART Chief Development Officer promoted as Era of Change begins. That's also from June 28th. Transit Authority officials broke ground last month on the new $21 million DART Central Station at 6th Avenue and Cherry Street in downtown Des Moines. A consultant is helping DART redraw routes and consider service change improvement. To get the job done, they picked somebody who was already doing the job, and that's Elizabeth Prasuti, DART's Chief Development Officer. During a special meeting on Monday, DART Commission members voted unanimously to name Prasuti as their next general manager. She will be paid $125,000 per year. Prasuti was already in charge of the new DART Central Station and the DART Forward 2035, the 25-year long-range planning for the 155 bus system that serves 20 governments and more than 4 million riders a year in the Des Moines metro area. Prasuti joined DART in 2008 after nearly 5 years as manager of service planning for the Charlotte, North Carolina system. She also worked for Transportation Management and Design Incorporated, the Carlsbad, California consultant company, helping DART shape its 2035 project. And so, again, from the last show for general manager by the bus, take one for the team and consider riding the bus as from an educational standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, but also as a role model to provide an example to other reluctant users in the spirit of good public relations. But anyway, from even just a policy standpoint, information is power. And my thought is, by increasing first-hand knowledge of its own service, DART may increase its own ability to make improvements based on community and operation needs rather than executive desires, and with that may come increased revenue. Based on the classic model of Iowa Rail and the use of freight for economic survival, I do wonder if DART might consider creating a messenger service or a delivery service, cross-town same-day delivery, to offset passenger fares. So DART has also issued a public notice. This is in the Iowa Bystander. DART Disadvantaged Business Enterprise DBE goal for fiscal year 2012 through 2014. The Des Moines Area Regional Transit Authority, in accordance with regulations, announces its fiscal year 2012-2014 goal of 0.48% for DBE participation on Federal Transit Administration assisted contracts, purchases, and services. The proposed goal and its rationale are available for public review for the next 30 days during normal business hours of 8 to 5 p.m. through Monday through Friday at the DART office located at 1100 DART Way in Des Moines, Iowa. Written comments regarding the goal and the methodology used for developing it will be accepted for 45 days after publication of this notice. For more information, visit ridedart.com or contact Deborah Mayer, DART Capital Planning Manager. And so I estimate that 45 days means public commentary will be accepted until July 31st on that DBE goal. Standing in front of the Urban Ambassadors booth, I spoke with Lee of Urban Ambassadors, and he told me about the Green Challenge, and then they have a contest too. This is a periodical that I showed the last time. I didn't get into it then. I'm going to take a little look at it now. It's a periodical created by Meredith Corporation and then also Drake University School of Journalism. This article is titled The Ripple Effect, and it's dealing with recycling of glass, and it's Boulevard Brewing Company in Kansas City. So Boulevard Brewing Company produces enough beer to fill 16.6 million bottles each year in the Kansas City, Missouri area alone. Before 2009, less than 5% of Boulevard's bottles were recycled. Their solution, Ripple Glass, a glass processor facility and collection service with the goal of placing large recycling bins just 5 minutes drive from every house in the Kansas City metro. Ripple's processing strategy and high quantity of drop-off receptacles now hauls to the plant resulted in a less contaminated end product, thus opening up a new market for recycled glass in the Kansas City area. Okay. There's also another article in the same issue that I thought was pretty interesting. Harnessing the heat. A Stockholm train station transforms human body heat into sustainable energy for a neighboring office building. They have many initiatives, much of what can be found on the 8035 website. They also have information, for instance, doorstep recycling, and this is something with Recycle Me Iowa. So they do a lot of cooperative programs. This particular solution has reduced the building's energy costs by about 20%, and that's according to Klaus Johansson, and that's the project spokesman. He's with Johansson, a company in Sweden. Every day, 250,000 people pass through the station catching trains and shopping. Each person generates 100 watts of body heat that would normally pass through ventilation and go to waste. Central Station in Stockholm pumps the excess heat from commuters through heat exchangers in a ventilation system. After the heat is converted to hot water, it travels to the neighboring Kunzbrohuset office park to heat the building. Further down the road, we're in front of Recycle Me Iowa's booth, and they are next door to the Des Moines Bicycle Collective, and they're doing valet parking. Lots of green, sustainable, concerned community initiatives at 8035. And I want to thank Lee for the information. Okay, so that brings us to energy, and first article on that is Nebraska, nuclear plant surrounded by water. Okay, this is coming from the Monday, June 27th, Des Moines Register. A federal commission had inspected the plant 20 miles north of Omaha when the 2,000-foot berm collapsed about 1:30 a.m. Sunday. Water surrounded the auxiliary and then contaminant buildings at the plant. The Omaha Public Power District has said the complex will not be reactivated until the flooding subsides. Its spokesman Jeff Hansen said that the berm wasn't critical to protecting the plant, but that a crew will look at whether it can be patched. I'm at 8035 downtown Des Moines, and there's a pretty sizable crowd. There's also a sizable number of people recycling. Very good, 8035 and Des Moines. and the berm's collapse didn't affect the reactor shutdown cooling or the spent fuel pool cooling, but the power supply was cut after water surrounded the main electrical transformer.
Here's an interesting recommendation. Leave only footprints behind.
This is coming from the June 28th issue. Branstad confident of safety. And so that's Terry Branstad looking out over the power plant, the flooding of the Missouri River south of Sioux City, and then also Council Bluffs.
There's nothing like people to make a downtown great.
Governor Terry Branstad said Monday he remains confident of the safety of 2 nuclear generating plants located on the Nebraska border along the flood-swollen Missouri River. Branstad said Iowa officials have been monitoring the status of the Fort Calhoun and Cooper nuclear plants, and he doesn't believe the public should be worried. He also praised officials from Iowa's public utilities for taking steps to prevent flooding at coal-fired electric plants. And so area photos of the Fort Calhoun and Cooper plants have drawn international attention and worries of possible impending disasters of a scale similar to Japan's tsunami-stricken Fukushima plant. Okay, so there's another article, and this is from the July 2nd issue of the New York Times. And here is the title: Court Won't Intervene in Fate of Nuclear Dump. A federal appeals court on Friday declined to step into a dispute over the Obama administration's cancellation of a planned nuclear waste dump in the Nevada desert, saying the matter must be left now to federal regulators. Congress directed the department in 1987 to develop an application to create the dump at Yucca Mountain, 100 miles northwest of Las Vegas, and instructed the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to determine whether the application met licensing requirements, which include isolating the radioactive waste for 1 million years. And so there's been a lot of different back and forth on a bureaucratic level. And so the decision noted that under the Nuclear Waste Policy Act, the Commission is supposed to rule on a license within 3 years after an application is filed, meaning last month, but it could give itself another year if it needed it. Still, many deadlines set in the Act have been missed by many years in the past, and so that is still uncertain at this point. And that's the current status of nuclear energy in the United States.
Plants make a downtown great too.
So there's an article in the July 3rd edition of the Des Moines Register. Uncertainty about ethanol clouds cellulosic plant plans. And this is a follow-up from the Nevada will get next generation ethanol plant that was also published in the Des Moines Register. Let's see. DuPont's announcement last week that it would build a next generation ethanol plant near Nevada came as a rare piece of good news for the embattled cellulosic ethanol industry. The original target was to reduce about 1 million gallons of cellulosic ethanol by this year. Instead, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency last month reduced its expectations for biofuel production in 2012 to just 6.5 million gallons this year and 12.9 million gallons in 2012. There's also extensive discussion in a certain part of this same edition of the Des Moines Register, and it's called Greenfields. And Greenfields is Iowa's agriculture and energy report. And there are several articles on ethanol, including ethanol credits, ethanol warning labels, and then the fact that Detroit airports are looking at growing its own fuels, corn exports, and then Grassley's push to extend biodiesel credits to 3 years. So lots of discussion on ethanol in the July 3rd Des Moines Register. So there's also an article in addition to that, and this is about India. Many villages in rural India give up on power grid, go solar, and this is an Associated Press article, and it says across India thousands of homes are receiving their first light through small companies and aid programs that are bypassing the central electricity grid to deliver solar panels to the rural poor. Those customers could provide the human energy that advocates of solar power have been looking for to fuel a boom in the next decade. In the same page, major U.S. cities are taking steps to become greener. New York City, the city intends to plant 1 million trees by 2017 and already has staked 483,229. In Denver, a 122-mile, $6.9 billion expansion to its current 35-mile light and commuter rail T-Rex network has started. In Seattle, a $20 million grant from the United States Department of Energy has launched an energy retrofit program for 2,200 buildings, including 2,000 single-family homes. Los Angeles, the Water and Power Department's use of renewable energy has jumped from 5% of the total in 2005 to 20% in 2010 and aims to hit 33% by 2020. The city has also planted more than 300,000 trees since 2005 and aims, like New York City, to plant 1 million. And this is an article from the USA Today reprinted in the Des Moines Register. That takes us onward to jobs. This article is also from the July 2nd New York Times, and it's called Pay Workers Fairly and Save Money. It's coming from the opinion section. Our government shops for $500 billion in goods and services each year. Nearly 1 of every 4 workers is employed by a company that receives federal contracts, but many government contractors routinely violate minimum wage and maximum hour laws. A 2010 study of the 50 largest wage penalties by the Government Accountability Office found that half were against companies that received federal contracts in the 2009 fiscal year. This meant not only that workers received less than their due, but also caused a drain on tax dollars as they turned to Medicaid and food stamps to make ends meet. So, too many of them depend on public assistance to supplement their wages. As taxpayers, we pour money into this leaky bucket and end up paying twice for services we get once. Safety nets are important, but we should also seek to lay out trampolines to lift workers into a growth economy. One act of leadership can make our federal spending part of the solution instead of the problem. And so the author of this opinion, Janice Natoli, is actually calling for an executive order by President Barack Obama. The July 3rd Des Moines Register. And it's how Iowa wound up with a big budget surplus. And according to David Albert, there's 2 reasons. The state budget year that ended this past Thursday leaves behind one of the largest surpluses ever, about $480 million, and that's according to estimates by the Legislative Services Agency. The budget adopted Thursday for the 2012 fiscal year that began Friday will use a little less than half of that $480 million surplus. An estimate from the LSA projects the surplus at the end of fiscal year 2012 will be about $265 million, assuming lawmakers don't dip back into that extra cash between now and June 30th of next year. This surplus, by the way, is on top of the state's, quote, rainy day fund, which contains more than $430 million. Add the two together and you get more than $900 million, which is one heck of an emergency fund for state government to be holding at a time when cities, counties, and schools around the state are running on empty. And so he does ask the question, how did the surplus get to be so big? And then he answers the question. According to Albert, there are two main reasons. One reason is the 10% across-the-board budget cut that former Governor Chet Culver ordered in October 2009. The bottom line is that Chet Culver's 10% cut made a permanent dent in the state budget. The pain that it inflicted, particularly on low-income Iowans, probably cost the Democrat a second term as governor when he ran in 2010 against Republican Terry Branstad. The other reason for Iowa's big end-year surplus is that the economy, at least in Iowa, has been performing better than expected. That good fortune is largely attributable to agriculture and the farm equipment industry, both of which have been booming because of export demand and alternative uses for crops such as ethanol. And I'm going to add in the growth of the wind turbine industry too, which has also benefited the agricultural sector, since all of those turbines have been built on land leased by the farmers, which means additional income for them. Iowa farmers are experiencing a boom like they haven't seen since the 1970s, and that's putting money in their pockets, the suppliers' pockets, and now state government coffers. CNBC, the business news cable TV channel, recently published a 50-state study that ranked the states by various attributes. Iowa's strong point, according to the survey, was that we tied with Arkansas for having the lowest cost of doing business. According to CNBC, the category included taxes, wages, and utility and real estate cost. Iowa was weakest, according to the survey, in a category labeled infrastructure and transportation, which is unfortunate because those used to be our strengths. And as we've seen from the videos I've shown of past railroad enterprises throughout the state of Iowa, and then following up with current debate over passenger rail service and increased freight service at the same time in the state of Iowa, has also been acknowledged. The CNBC poll, and then the writer of the article, Dave Albert. All right.
Look at these plants. Gosh, the downtown Des Moines area is fabulous during AB 35. Nice.
So now it's time for the legislative roundup. We heard a lot of issues about public transportation, the economy, jobs, energy, and so overall we just finished the legislative session. The Des Moines Register did an extensive breakdown of how that turned out. I picked out a few based on the usual reporting that we do here on Blue.Green.Fusion. In terms of the Economic Development Agency, Governor Terry Branstad promised while campaigning last year to eliminate the current Economic Development Department and convert it into a public-private partnership. Approved. In terms of low-income tax breaks, which the Register considered a Democrat priority, Iowans making less than $40,000 a year would have been eligible for more tax breaks under provision in a bill that Branstad vetoed in April. The measure was subsequently resurrected and approved again by lawmakers. The latest version of the Earned Income Tax Credit, if signed by Branstad, would reduce taxes for roughly 240,000 families by about $14 million a year. Amtrak, and this is again under a Democrat priority column. Lawmakers agreed to keep $5 million in state funding available for proposed Iowa City to Chicago Amtrak passenger train, but they did not make a commitment to provide the remaining $15 million in state money required from Iowa as a match to receive $230 million federal grant from the train awarded last year to Iowa and Illinois. That means the fate of Iowa City passenger rail service will probably be decided in a future legislative session. In terms of the commercial property tax, this was considered a priority by Republicans and Democrats and the governor. Governor Terry Branstad originally proposed cutting the percentage of a commercial property's value that is taxed from 100% to 60% over a 5-year period. He said property tax reform was one of his priorities in stimulating the state's economy and creating jobs. The measure failed. Another measure, and this is called Ag Video, also referred to as the Ag Gag. Iowa farm workers would have faced felony charges for taking undercover pictures, video, or audio of animal agriculture operations. The House passed the bill, but the Senate did not, so it failed. Nuclear energy. Under a proposed bill, the Iowa Utilities Board could have proceeded with rate-making principles if a rate-regulated public utility moved forward with plans to build a nuclear plant. The bill passed the House but stalled in the Senate, and this past week there's been that reporting on events at two nuclear facilities in the state of on the Iowa border. Corporate income tax cuts. One of Governor Branstad's campaign pledges was to slash Iowa's corporate income tax by 50%, which he said would attract businesses while costing the state about $200 million a year in lost revenue. Branstad proposed offsetting this loss by approving an increase in state casino taxes by at least 50%. Casino lobbyists resisted, and the House Republicans declined the proposal, saying they didn't want to raise taxes. Right to work. Iowa Republicans wanted to require that the state's Economic Development Department place a slogan on the top of its business recruitment and promotional stationery that said, "Iowa is a right-to-work state." The term describes Iowa's prohibition against agreements between labor unions and employers that make union membership a condition of employment. The bill did not pass the Senate. Iowa state government did not shut down. The most extreme legislation did not pass either one or another branch of the House. It was either voted down or held for further review. Thank you very much for watching episode 28 of Blue.Green.Fusion.